Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, where we take a prominent figure franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mr. Jason Gong.
Hello.
And on today's episode, we are talking about the Kiwi writer, director, new little up-and-coming star child for the big movie franchise, Mr. Taika Waititi. Before we get into how we rate this guy, I just want to remind everyone that this podcast exists in audio and video formats. So whether you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music, or you're listening to it on YouTube and seeing our smiling faces right now, hello.
Hello.
We also have a TikTok, and Instagram, and Facebook. Wherever you get your short form content, we'll be posting clips of these podcasts as well. So definitely follow us everywhere. All of our social links are in the description of this podcast. So Jason, today we are talking about Taika Waititi. Before we can talk about whether he is overrated or underrated, first, we need to figure out how this guy is rated. And it's interesting because unlike the other podcast topics that we've done so far, which are usually like films or filmmakers that are like 10, 20 years old, this is a relatively newer director. He's definitely up and coming into the mainstream now.
Yeah. So his first film, Eagle vs. Shark, came out in 2007, which means that his career as a director is under 20 years old, or as a film director.
Yeah, though it's not where he first came into the spotlight though. He did a short film called Two Cars One Night back in 2003 that was nominated for an Oscar. It was nominated for Best Live Action Short in 2005. That's like a pretty good way to start your directing career.
Yeah, to be nominated for an Oscar. Yeah, he came out swinging, honestly. And he also did a lot of work on Flight of the Conchords. He was a really big presence in New Zealand way before we ever heard of him.
Yeah, and he's also not super young. I did say he's an up and coming director. He's 48 years old, so he's been working in movies for quite a while. He's also a comedian, first and foremost. Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords is a buddy of his. They had a comedy duo when they were living together in New Zealand.
Yep.
And then they started doing movies and music videos and stuff like that together.
Yep, he was on a sketch comedy team with a number of funny New Zealand people. So he's had a very interesting career that's really grown a lot over the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, he's a really, really interesting guy because he's kind of had two careers.
Yeah, there's him as a director and him as a performer.
Yeah, and it's him as this guy doing these interesting small budget comedic personal films in New Zealand where he's using a bunch of New Zealand actors. For the most part, really delightful little movies that didn't have huge budgets. They didn't get a lot of box office attention, but they're good. And then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Yeah, Kevin Feige.
And that was Thor Ragnarok, though interestingly enough, Thor Ragnarok was not his first foray into Disney. I did not know this, but he wrote the initial screenplay for Moana, the animated Disney film. So that's clearly how he got his foot in the door with Disney. Funny enough, from what I was reading at least, they didn't really use much of his script. They kind of completely rewrote things. His original script was based around her relationship with her brothers. I believe in the movie she doesn't even have siblings.
Right.
And it was also about her and her father going on an adventure. That's not the case in the movie. She's going on an adventure with Maui. He was a demigod.
Yeah. Is he even credited on
I do not think he gets a writing credit in Moana at all. Funny enough, he took a lot of the aspects of that original screenplay from Moana and he used it for Hunt of the Wilder People.
Makes sense.
Which is also a story about a father and a child going on an adventure together.
Yeah, I see it. That's cool. Well, I like Hunt for the Wilder People more than Moana, so...
Yeah, but like you said, he started with Eagle vs. Shark, which I just saw for the first time. Did you see it for the first time, too?
Yep.
So we saw it together this week. Delightful little movie. Mm-hmm. It's like Napoleon Dynamite, basically.
Yeah. You compared it a lot to Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, you like Napoleon Dynamite more still?
I'm a huge Napoleon Dynamite fan. I just love movies about losers, and that's one of his calling cards of his early movies here, at least, is that everybody is a loser.
Yeah, I would say even his later movies. I think he turns Thor into a loser to great benefit.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get to the MCU side of his career.
Mm-hmm.
But he's clearly like, because he's a comedian first and foremost, he has no problem with just like making a laughing stock of all of his characters. Like he doesn't need any cool people, or what he does is he takes characters that think that they're cool and they're definitely not cool.
Yeah.
His next film is Boy, which came out in 2010. Another like small budget film, didn't make much, but really high Rotten Tomato score, 88%. He just goes on a roll here. 2014, What We Do in the Shadows is an awesome movie.
Yeah.
It's a mockumentary film about a group of vampires who are roommates. It's delightful. It's really funny. It got turned into a television series, which I have not seen, but I know that the television series people love as well. It's just an awesome idea for like any sort of story. It's so malleable.
Yeah, it's a really fun one. It's already considered like one of the funniest movies of all time, I think.
Yeah, that's got 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, though. It made less than $10 million at the box office.
Really? 'Cause I remember it did get like at least a little bit of marketing over here. I saw trailers for it.
Yeah, and then after that, he did Hunt for the Wilder People, which made $23 million on a $2 million budget. So
Wow.
really good job. And that is a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like people absolutely love that movie.
I love that movie.
I think it's okay.
I made a lot of people watch that movie with me. Like when it came out, I made them come see it in the theaters with me.
I think this is fine in general for movies, but it does suffer a bit from like lack of real plot. It is kind of just like a series of gags in the forest.
I just love a little adventure movie about like two people just trying to live out there in the wilderness. I love that. I like Moonrise Kingdom is one of my favorite movies too, and it has similar vibes.
Yeah,
Have
but
you
this
ever
first,
seen
I have not seen Moonrise Kingdom.
Okay.
We'll have to do
a Wes Anderson
movie
yeah.
episode for sure. But this first 10 years of movies that he's making, basically entirely in New Zealand.
Yep.
He's using a lot of repeat actors.
Sure.
And he's getting like some recognition, but he hasn't blown up yet. It's pretty crazy. You watch Hunt for the Wilder People, and in no way would you think this is the guy that we need to hand the keys to like a major Marvel franchise. But that's what they did.
Yeah, they did exactly that. Like I think it was 1 year later, Thor Ragnarok came out.
Thor Ragnarok comes out in 2017. So Hunt for the Wilder People, budget of $2.5 million. Thor Ragnarok, budget of $180 million.
That's crazy.
Like the levels that he stepped up between movies is freaking absurd.
Yeah, that's insane to think about.
And I mean, I guess we could talk about here like where Thor was as a character in the MCU at the time. Thor: The Dark World, considered like one of the worst movies in the MCU. People hate that movie.
Yeah.
And the first Thor movie is directed by Kenneth Branagh, who he's a guy that does like Shakespeare movies.
Yeah, I like that movie quite a bit. I think I'm one of the few defenders of the first Thor movie.
But you're not going to find like many like polar opposite interpretations of a Thor movie than going from like Kenneth Branagh to what Taika Waititi does with Thor Ragnarok, where he makes it very colorful. He uses a lot of like classic rock music. He turns Thor into this like comedic character, basically. Chris Hemsworth has amazing comedic presence.
Yep.
And he uses it to great effect in the movie. It's a fun story of him fighting Hela. Cate Blanchett plays Hela. Really fun little villain. His relationship with Loki is fleshed out more in the movie. There's a whole like Planet Hulk side of Thor Ragnarok that's great. With Mark Ruffalo. There's also the character of Korg.
Played by
Taika Waititi.
Yep.
Taika Waititi, not only is he one of those directors that likes to write his movies, he also likes to act in them.
Yep.
And I think Korg is like, he's fine, like little side character. Though I think Taika has a habit of like making his characters like more important than they probably should be at times.
Yeah, he indulged himself quite a bit with that Korg character, especially because that character keeps coming back.
But Thor Ragnarok had great reviews. It was a revitalization, and it's what put Taika Waititi on the map. And he became a household name. If you didn't know who he was before, I knew who he was like with What We Do in the Shadows and Hunt for the Wilder People.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
But like if you're a mainstream movie person, like people know who Taika Waititi is now.
To some extent, yeah. I mean, I don't think he has the same recognition as like Nolan or even like Zack Snyder, but people who follow these nerd franchises know who he is for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so much so in 2022, he was named by Time as one of the 100 most influential people in the world under their entertainment section.
Okay. Under entertainment. Yeah, I could see it.
So he's like he's got a voice. I mean, it makes sense. He doesn't just do like the Marvel stuff. He's got his hands in a lot of cookie jars now.
Yeah, he's definitely following that like one for them, one for me pattern, right? Because between the two Thors, he released Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, and Jojo Rabbit is like his like Oscar movie.
Yeah.
That movie got a ton of Oscar nominations, which I didn't realize until I was doing the research for this. I was like, wow, people love Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah.
It won Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars, which is a big deal, which he got writing credit on. Interestingly enough, do you know the one movie that he's done that he does not have a writing credit on?
That he directed?
Yes. There's one movie that he has directed that he does not have a writing credit on.
Shoot. Let me just go through them real quick. He only has, what, 7 films?
Yeah, it's 7 features, yep.
Is it the last Thor movie?
No, it is Thor Ragnarok.
It's Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok he did not
Interesting.
write.
He didn't write it? Oh, who wrote it?
I'm actually not sure who the writer
look it up.
was.
You
But
keep
that's interesting, though, right?
It is really interesting.
Yes, Jojo Rabbit, a crazy movie. If you've never seen it, when you hear me explain the plot of this movie, that it's about a boy in Germany who has an imaginary friend that is Adolf Hitler, played by Taika Waititi, and his mom is played by Scarlett Johansson, who is like basically like a rebel in Nazi Germany. It's a fun little movie. I have no idea why it got the Oscar attention that it did. I think it's fine. On paper, it is an absurd concept of a movie.
Yeah, I think it's a good movie, and then like it's tackling very serious subject matter in a unique way, so that's always going to bring it attention, and it hit right for critics, I guess. But I'm of the same opinion as you. I think it's an okay movie. I think it's a good movie, but probably not like an Oscar contender for me.
I respect the game, Taika Waititi, of you going immediately from like the big break of your career directing a Marvel movie
To playing Hitler.
to saying I am going to write myself as Adolf Hitler and make it comedic.
Yeah, interesting choice for sure, but one that did pay off for him.
It's a gamble that paid off,
Yeah.
100%. It has an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, 94% audience score. Had a budget of $14 million, made $90 million to the box office. It's a good return.
Yeah, good for him.
And then he follows this up with doing basically like consultant work with like the Marvel stuff for Thor. Like he helped out with Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame with like the Thor scenes.
And he played Korg again.
He played Korg again. And he's also in The Mandalorian with Star Wars. He plays like an IG robot. I think he's directed a couple episodes of Mandalorian. You guys can fact check us in the comments there on that one. He's also slated to do a Star Wars movie. He's got like a bunch of like rumored films that are like crazy when I was like reading them. He's got a Star Wars film in development. There's a ton of Star Wars films in development, technically speaking, but he's like one of their guys that's like, hey, when we decide to start making Star Wars movies again, we want Taika to do one of the movies. He was rumored to do an Akira movie for like the longest time.
I feel like people just rumor the biggest director. So like the up and coming. I remember it was like
It was Jordan Peele. Wasn't
Jordan
it?
Peele's not directing Akira. Let's get Taika Waititi to direct Akira. Yeah. Every director has been attached to Akira.
He's also been like a bunch of like other like mainstream films, I guess you can say. He was in the Green Lantern movie with Ryan Reynolds.
That was maybe his first foray into American movies, actually. That was way before Moana.
Yeah, that was a while ago. He was in The Suicide Squad with James Gunn, so he's not rumored to direct any of those DC movies, but he's buddies with James Gunn, clearly.
I really liked him in that movie. He only played Ratcatcher 1, this character that only shows up in flashbacks.
Yeah.
But he was just in some really lovely...
And you got to imagine he's only in the movie because he's buddies with James Gunn, right?
Yeah. That's fun that there's like a tight-knit community of like weird little movie directors that broke out.
So what's a comedic DC character that Taika could do a movie for?
I don't know. He's already played 2, I guess. I'd like to see him as like a bad guy, but still being really silly.
Yeah. Well, like the Riddler or something.
He would be a fun Riddler, yeah.
But he's also directed like music videos. You know, he does a lot of like random work in like the entertainment industry. Like he gets around.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest projects he was in as a performer lately was Our Flag Means Death. Did you watch that?
Oh, the pirate show?
Yeah.
I've not seen that, no.
Comedic pirate show. Yeah, he played Blackbeard, I think, which is like the one of the main characters, and he plays like sort of this badass that's still really funny. I don't know. It was an interesting role, and I think that show was directed by or produced by Jermaine. Just his buddies. But yeah, it was very much like him hanging out with his old New Zealand crew for the first time since he broke into Hollywood.
Yeah.
And he kind of helped bring a lot of them over and get that American support. So that's nice.
But so, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you've never heard of Taika Waititi, everything we've said so far has been positive, and you're like, oh, this guy's great. Like up and coming new director.
Yeah,
everybody
is there
likes
something
him.
coming out or something that's coming up next in his career that's not as positive?
Well, unfortunately, there's a film called Thor: Love and Thunder where everything just kind of fell apart for this guy.
He peaked personally in his personal life, and then he was like, I don't need to do this anymore, and he phoned it in so hard for this movie.
Yeah, he separated from his like longtime wife.
Yep.
To date and then later marry Rita Ora, who's a singer.
Yeah.
The man's doing good for himself.
And reportedly they had a threesome with Tessa Thompson.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, son of a bitch. Yeah, so he does that, and then he's like, he gets the call for the Marvel movie. He's like, I don't care about this.
He's like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Thor. And so reportedly he was like not all there on the set of Thor: Love and Thunder. He was just kind of winging it a little bit. May have been taking drugs, allegedly.
Yeah, we don't need to like spiral rumors, but he's reportedly not all there is probably the best way you could put it.
Yeah, allegedly he didn't do a great job directing this movie.
I mean, whether or not he was on drugs, whether or not he was all there, he didn't do a good job directing this movie.
Thor: Love and Thunder is a fucking garbage fire of a movie.
One of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, it is physically painful to watch. Like, how does this happen?
Like, he didn't care. He would like watch scenes back. He did it for like Variety or something. And he was like, "Does this look fake? Does this look fake?"
I forgot. Yeah, him and Tessa Thompson were like
They're
nagging
tearing
on
into the
CGI
movie. Yeah.
on the poor, overworked CGI artists
Oh my
from
gosh.
Marvel.
Insane.
And like the movie like took Chris Hemsworth out of it too. He was like, I don't want to do comedic Thor anymore.
Yeah, which he loved doing after Ragnarok.
He's like, we've just turned this character into a laughing stock. And this goes back to his like older movies. Like that's his thing, is to take characters that think that they're cool and make like a joke out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it works for one movie. And then you get to the second Thor movie that he does, and it just does not work. It doesn't even come fucking close.
Mm-hmm.
He's adapting the Lady Thor comic storyline roughly.
Yeah,
You know, with Jane Foster having cancer. Natalie Portman, amazing actress.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything to
On paper, you think, well, this is great. They're finally going to give her like her time to shine. Maybe she takes like the mantle from Thor.
Yeah, I was so
at the end of this
excited.
movie.
Yep, nope, doesn't happen.
That is not what happens. Spoilers. She does not make it out of this movie alive.
She dies. That's actually just a general problem with the MCU and women. A lot of female characters get killed off for no reason.
And then, I mean, poor Christian Bale, like just going for it in this movie.
He's pretty good. He's solid.
The man earned his paycheck for this movie, and
It's the only one that did.
Taika just doesn't give a shit. Way too much Korg also.
So much Korg.
Taika, he read the script for this movie, and he was like, on second pass, you know what we need? We need more Korg.
Yeah.
This movie needs more me.
Weird choices from Taika for sure.
And so if you're worried about like the future of like his like movies or like his stuff, he definitely seems a little bit narcissistic.
Yeah, I could see that argument. For sure.
He has big like I'm the smartest, funniest guy in the room energy.
Yeah, we're digging in and kind of speculating a little bit, but that might be a takeaway just from that last Thor movie. That last Thor movie is what kind of tanks a lot of his goodwill that he built over the years.
And at least for like me, I'm making the argument that he's overrated. Mm-hmm. Like I have no idea if this man can make anything that's not in his wheelhouse of like comedy.
Sure.
Like it's entirely possible that he's just like one dimensional in the way that like he can write stuff, and like that box is like it's fine. Like he can make like small little like comedic films that are fun. I get the only argument against it is Jojo Rabbit, which is like not a super funny movie.
Yeah, it's a little more serious.
It's a movie that gets serious, but he's kind of like at least for me, like he's in a prove it stage right now.
Sure.
Like, as someone who is like a Star Wars fan, I see him directing a Star Wars movie. I feel more worried than excited.
My argument would just be like, I don't know. You can't get that much worse than where Star Wars is at now.
And also, you can't get much worse than Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah, yeah. There's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, it's not often you see a director hit like rock bottom with a movie.
Yeah.
So plainly.
It's almost funny. Like
Like-
the meta joke of it is almost funny enough to make up for it, but it's not. It's a bad movie.
Like, the counter is like, he'll never make a worse movie than that.
God, I hope
That's as bad as it gets for him.
Well, he's got another film coming up. Is it at the end of this year or is it early next year? Next Goal Wins is his next movie. And that's, again, another original project. So it's one for them, one for me. And hopefully his one for me this time is going to like sort of bring him back to his roots a little bit, be a funny little charming movie, and kind of put him back in the standing that he was in before he directed Thor: Love and Thunder.
So I guess now we got to figure out how we're going to rate him on our arbitrary scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
I'll repeat this. We've been repeating it every podcast. If you have a better rating system in mind, feel free to leave a comment.
Yeah.
Give us a shout out.
If once we release episodes, maybe someone will give us an idea.
We're desperately searching for a better rating system than 1 to 10. In my opinion, it's a little boring, but
It is a little boring, but like, what are you gonna do?
did we go fresh or rotten? Fresh or rotten?
No.
For anybody that's listening to this and not watching the podcast, I have a little sign of Rotten Tomatoes, fresh and rotten.
Yeah, we got that from Comic-Con like 10 years ago.
It's a fun little prop to have. I think that Taika is like a 6.5.
I was just gonna say 7. So
Yeah, he's definitely up and coming, which is like part of what makes this topic interesting. Is that he's a guy that probably hasn't hit his peak yet. He's 48. He's got all of these like big budget movies like reportedly in development.
yeah,
So I mean, it's possible that he comes out and he makes like the best Star Wars movie of the last like 10 years or something like that, and it just like fucking like just rockets him to another level entirely.
that would be cool.
Or he makes another Thor: Love and Thunder, and this becomes like, oh, this guy's a joke. Like, he just makes joke movies because he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, that would be kind of sad, honestly. Like to see that rising star fall so quickly. I would not like that. I loved Hunt for the Wilder People. I took all my friends to see it, and so I was on that shit before a lot of other people, I think, before he kind of made his big Hollywood break. And I've been rooting for him ever since.
Yeah, it's tough. I almost wish we could like view a world where he never makes like the big Hollywood jump, and he just keeps making his like little movies in New Zealand.
I think they'd all be better than Thor:
Yeah,
Love and Thunder.
they'd probably all just be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we've come to an agreement on how he's properly rated,
Yeah, 6.75 is where we're at, right?
6.75. Lock it in. We are going to be talking about whether he is overrated or underrated. Jason, you have the job of arguing that Taika Waititi is underrated. What do you got?
I think my main argument is just going to be that a lot of mainstream movie viewers haven't seen his early work, and his early work is awesome. We watched Eagle versus Shark. Neither of us would have done that if it weren't for this podcast, and yet it was a really charming little movie, and it's not rated that highly either. Dylan, do you have the rating for that?
Yeah, it's 57 on Rotten Tomatoes.
57 on Rotten Tomatoes. So a lot of critics didn't like it at the time, and it was his first movie. So, once you're an established director, people might bump you up or bump you down accordingly. This was people going in raw with this guy's first movie, and about half of them didn't like it. But we watched it, and we both actually really liked that movie. I think a lot of other people would too. It's like Napoleon Dynamite, but everyone has a funny accent. And it just elevates the movie.
That is like low-key a worry of mine with him, is that maybe New Zealand accents are just like naturally really funny.
Yeah, maybe his jokes aren't funny, but just all the voices are funny.
The way that he says things is silly. Like the way they say yes.
Yes.
They say yes.
I love it. It makes me giggle every time. And that's a sign of a good movie for me. Boy is really good. Hunt for the Wilder People is, in my opinion, one of the best movies I've ever seen. I think it's shot beautifully. I think it's super funny, but also there's a lot of emotional moments that really hit. I love a story about like people living in the wilderness to kind of learn about themselves. And this is one of the best movies to ever do it. They also have these really funny New Zealand accents that just puts it over the top. I guess even though that's probably like his highest rated critically from his New Zealand era, What We Do in the Shadows is probably his most culturally significant film from that era. It's the one that's got the television reboot sequel. It's the one that probably more people, I think, have seen.
I think What We Do in the Shadows is probably his best movie, just like straight up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good. I think it's probably his most high concept movie, too, outside of the Marvel stuff, because a vampire documentary or
Yeah, like you watch it and like 10 minutes in, you're like, this is so freaking creative.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant. So a lot of people haven't seen that work yet, and if they did, I think they'd really like this guy. Like for a lot of Americans, I think his body of work consists of Thor Ragnarok, Jojo Rabbit, and Thor Love and Thunder, and you're not getting the best Taika out of that. You're arguably getting the worst Taika out of that.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting because to like a mainstream, especially an American audience, you look at him and you might think that he's like really young, that this is like an actor, a director in his like 20s or something like that. And like, this is a guy that's made like 3 movies and he's got his whole career ahead of him. But like you said, this is a guy that's been working for 20 years.
Yeah, and he's put in the work too. Like he's been writing, he's been directing, he's been acting. Like even though we're kind of saying that maybe he phoned it in for Love and Thunder, he's been working really hard. And he deserves a break that comes with a multi-million-dollar paycheck once in a while. We all do.
Listen, who among us?
Yeah, right? Who hasn't had a bad day at work? But yeah, like that early work is just, and some of it's like genuinely beautiful. It's all unique. I really love Hunt for the Wilder People, What We Do in the Shadows, and boy, and then even Eagle versus Shark is really special. Just to have that sort of lineup, really cool.
So your main argument for him being underrated is that early work is just it's one good and two underseen by the general like movie.
Yeah,
audiences.
I think that is my main argument. I also wrote down here in my notes, didn't write many. Thor 3 reinvigorated the character and had lasting impacts on the MCU. So honestly, I'm kind of like bored just talking about the MCU. I don't care that much, but I will say you kind of brought this up really early in the podcast. Coming from Thor 2 to Thor 3, he completely reinvents the character. And Thor 2 was kind of one of the worst MCU movies, and the character was really boring in it. So they really had to overhaul it, and he was the right guy for that job.
Yeah, he kind of revitalized Chris Hemsworth's career in a little bit too, because he was starting to get kind of painted into this corner of just like this like big muscle dude who had like nothing else, who had nothing else to offer, but he's like really funny.
Yeah.
And for him to be able to show off those chops is it's cool. And yeah, you're right. Thor Ragnarok is like a good movie. I don't think it's like incredible. Like if I was doing like a ranking of like MCU films, I don't think it's cracking top 10, but it's good.
Yeah, it's probably my top 10, but maybe not top 5. And then, like I said, had lasting impacts on the MCU. That movie is the one that most directly leads into Infinity War, which is like this big milestone of MCU movies. So if we're going to talk about the MCU, Taika was like massively influential on it, to the extent where they let him write himself into the movies. Between his early work and then him being the right guy to call to fix Thor, I think he is an underrated director.
All right. So I have the job of arguing that Taika Waititi is overrated, and the main argument for him being overrated is that just he hasn't proved that he can do anything outside his box yet. If you're thinking of him in the upper echelon of movie directors, which is where you get placed when you're getting rumored for these like giant franchise movies, when you're getting handed the keys to Star Wars, or you're getting handed the keys to Akira, which is an adaptation that like has been talked about forever, and they've been waiting for like the right guy basically to come along to make it perfect, because they don't want to fuck that up. He's being talked about as like the next big thing, or like one of the next big things. He's put in that same light as like Jordan Peele or someone like Ari Aster, if you're talking about like more like indie side, like he's an up and comer. Like this guy's legit, and I just don't know if he is. He's clearly a guy that can make like enjoyable little comedic films that are low budget, that are like low risk, low reward type stuff. However, he's yet to like really prove it on the biggest stage yet. When it comes to like his big Hollywood movies, he's 2 for 3 right now. And Jojo Rabbit is good. I don't think it really proves anything. Thor Ragnarok is like kind of like a proof of concept that like his style can work at a bigger scale. But then like Thor Love and Thunder is like, I mean, that's the type of stuff that keeps you up at night. If you're like one of these movie executives trying to like determine who you're going to hand $200 million to have them give you a return of $1 billion at the box office. This is also a guy that he kind of seems like unhinged a little bit when you're watching him in like press junkets or just like doing interviews and stuff like that. He seems like he's a guy that's having a lot of fun allegedly in his personal life. And it's entirely possible that he's just like gotten the bag and he's like, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to coast. He's built these relationships with folks in Hollywood. Clearly he's buddies with Kevin Feige. He's buddies with James Gunn. He's buddies with like Jon Favreau because he's doing all this Star Wars stuff. And he's probably just cool, just kind of coasting on that. And that's a little worrisome. And if you're going to put him in the upper echelon of directors, because like I said, he was put in like Time's like top 100 most influential last year. He's clearly thought of in really high regard. I know that we gave him a rating as 6.75, on our very specific scaling, of course. I think in reality, he probably he ends up lower than that. I do agree with you that his like earlier films are underwatched. If you're a film fan, definitely go check out his stuff. He's one of those directors where like you watch his earlier movies and it's kind of inspiring. Because like you watch What We Do in the Shadows and you go, well, I could shoot this. Like he's not doing anything crazy here. It's just like well written, and the scenes, they flow, and there's good, good interactions between the actors. But I think like overall, he just hasn't proven it yet that he's got the range and the ability to really like define himself as like a really, really great director. And maybe he gets there, but for the sake of this like podcast and this argument, he's just not there yet.
I definitely see where you're coming from. A lot of his early movies have a very similar vibe, that like early 2000s, early 2010s indie movie type of vibe. He doesn't exactly break the mold with his comedy there, except for What We Do in the Shadows. I think that one does kind of stand out quite a bit.
I agree that I was really surprised that it didn't like make more money.
Yeah, I was shocked by that box office.
I don't know if it got like a limited release or like what happened. I couldn't.
Well, it definitely wasn't wide here, but I know they played it in Philly.
Because like it came out in 2014. Like I saw it maybe in 20 like I saw it a little after college. So like it was a movie that like I had heard about, and I was like, oh, this movie's awesome. So it didn't that one at least didn't feel like a small like indie movie at least.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is that there's like a lot of directors that make really good indie movies that never like make that step up to like the big leagues. I know that that's something that like Marvel kind of does. They take directors that are from smaller budget stuff, and I'm sure there's like a control element to it where they can kind of like dictate what that director does with his movie. But just Taika's, I mean, he's such a whole different level personality wise. That's a guy that when you watch him, you can understand like how he's gotten where he's gotten, because he's so energetic and he just comes off as so creative. But for the sake of like our rating system here, like he's just not there yet with these movies. It's so limited. He's only done 7 feature films, and 4 of his feature films are budgets of like less than $2 million. He's in the prove it stage still.
It is interesting because like with 20 years of work, you shouldn't still be at that stage.
It is weird. Yeah, it's like he's been working for 20 years and this is all he has. I mean, he's done other. He's also written, like he's a writer and director, and he's an actor. Yeah, and he does like music videos.
He's quite prolific. I think like he deserves to be a household name. The main question is like whether as a household name is he overrated or underrated.
Yeah, and I guess like for most of the podcast we've been talking about him in the context of him being a director, but he does wear a lot of different hats as an entertainer that goes beyond just directing. So that's also something to consider. All right, so there are our arguments for overrated and underrated. Jason, where do you think our verdict comes in here for Taika Waititi? Is he overrated or underrated?
I mean, I believe a lot of the things I said. I have been swayed by a lot of the things you've said. So I think I'm just going to have to say that our rating of 6.75 was properly rated.
Okay, so Jason's taking the coward's way out.
Wow, dude.
Properly rated.
Wow.
Everybody put coward in the comments.
That's fine. You don't know where I'm from. We like it.
I kind of agree that he is a little overrated right now. It just kind of comes with the territory of being like the next big name that people are talking about when it comes with movies. I would say like Jordan Peele, like after Get Out, was also overrated.
Wow, that's crazy, and we'll have to do an episode on it. Leave a
We'll
comment.
have to do it, but like if you make like a movie that just kind of like breaks through and like the director's name, like if people are hearing the director's name just as much as like the stars of the movie, like it's a big deal, and that tends to like result in directors getting a little overrated. I mean, it happened with M. Night Shyamalan all the way back in like Sixth Sense. Like once you start like hearing the director's name after like a movie or two, you're like, all right, now this guy's got to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is going to be our podcast on Taika Waititi. I think it is an interesting conversation, given that he doesn't have as like long of a career for us to like look back on for stuff. But I think it's a good concept to like mix up like the different topics that we're talking about. You know, it's also nice to do a director that doesn't have 30, 40 movies that we have to go back and watch.
30, 40 movies.
Yeah, but anyway, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Let us know in the comments, did we get it right? Or some topics you'd like to see for future episodes? Make sure to leave a like on this episode and consider supporting us by checking out our Patreon page. We also have our link tree in the description of this podcast as well, so you can check us out on all of our socials. For myself, for Jason, that's going to be it for this one. We will catch you at the movies.
Bye.
Peace out, y'all. Yes.
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 Yes.